Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the San Diego Young Republicans podcast. I'm your host, the President and Chairwoman, Cynthia Cowie. Really excited for everything that we have for SDYR and just want to thank our sponsors, Brett Davis and IQ Podcast, for helping make this podcast come to fruition. SDYR released our initial batch of endorsements, so we're excited to be able to support our endorsed candidates all the way down from the congressional, all the way down to the local race. And so I'm excited to welcome one of our local endorsed candidates, Jim Miller, who is the Cajon Valley School Board Trustee President. Welcome, Mr. Miller.
Thanks for having me on.
Perfect. So to kick it off, I first off not only want to thank you for everything that you're doing for the school board, but also for the greater county, but also I would argue and venture to say the state of California, because you are a founding member of the San Diego County Gun Owners, who are great supporters of SDYR and help sponsor our most popular event of the organization, which is our shooting social. So it's no secret that the Second Amendment is under attack in the state of California. But the pro Second Amendment movement has seen some really significant victories on this forefront. I know that the court process, it takes some time to play out, but you actually are the plaintiff for the Miller versus Bonta lawsuit. I know that there's some legal stuff you might not be able to get into, but just wanted to be able to get an update on that in regards to the long-term impact and how it's playing out.
My lawsuit specifically, so there's been different iterations. We had kind of like the COVID arguments, then moved through the Ninth Circuit. Bruen gets decided in the Supreme Court, Bruen v. New York, come on back, re-argue the case. Now we're back up on the Ninth Circuit again. The Ninth Circuit, in light of Bruen, knowing that they have to basically rule in our favor, which they don't want to do, then put us to the side and then said that we are a related case to the Duncan case. The Duncan case is the 10 rounds in your magazine or more case that the anti-Second Amendment group likes to call the high capacity magazine case, which we in the shooting world call normal capacity magazine case. So because they tied us in with Duncan, the Duncan oral argument just happened a couple of weeks ago, but it delayed my case because they tied it to the Duncan case. So that's where we sit right now. There were two other assault weapons cases, assault weapons being that made up term for people who don't like military looking firearms, that were rejected for certiorari by the U.S. Supreme Court. One was out of Maryland. I believe the other might have been out of Illinois off the top of my head. So we're kind of on deck for that right now.
Perfect. Thank you for writing that update. And like I said, appreciate everything, the work that you're doing on this forefront. So just transitioning to your race, there is a lot of parents and families that are transitioning into homeschooling, just do the different things with public education and woke ideology. How do you think, as the school board president for Cajon Valley, like how do you think we could be able to reverse this trend and return focus to ultimately quality education?
So, in an interesting turn of events for Cajon Valley, right, our enrollment is increasing. We might be one of the few districts in the state, much less the county, that our enrollment is now back over 17,000 students that we have out of 27 school sites. And where we're seeing that particular engagement, it's twofold. One is the transitional kindergarten expansion, where they've changed the dates as to when transitional kindergarten could start. And that's a program that I am a huge fan of. My own daughter was in transitional kindergarten the very first year it was available. And literally every kid in that transitional kindergarten class that she had are the top students in their respective high schools at this point in time. They're the leaders on campus. They're very active. I cannot further support and encourage early schooling for your kids. But the other side is we're having a number of transfers from our neighboring districts: Lakeside, Santee, La Mesa Spring Valley, Homolda, Missouri. The neighboring districts, because we do things different in Cajon Valley, we're drawing these students from other districts who want to go to a more dynamic concept of school, keeping in mind that school under the current terms, modern education was really developed in the late 1800s in New York to go around the harvesting schedule to prepare workers for the Industrial Revolution. 6 hours a day, give or take, 6 subjects a day, give or take, 12 years, give or take, has been the routine since then. The idea to think beyond that to competency-based education, to career and professional development-based education really has not come about, which is what we need. I mean, we're working right now in general education for jobs that don't exist anymore or will not exist in 5 to 10 years. Our students deserve a better future than what's in the past because those jobs aren't going to be there anymore. So, but as a statewide basis, 1, homeschooling, private schooling, you should have that choice, absolutely. But why has the public sector been impacted, generally speaking? I think top to bottom, it has been lack of funding. There's been a serious funding gap for education. And then what you have is you have these, and we have them in other areas, correct? Unfunded mandates from the governor, from the state. They can say, Cajon Valley or San Diego Unified or whomever, you will have these particular programs. These particular programs are important for this sector of students. And then they don't fund them. So if you're a parent and you have a special ed's need child, as an example, and the special ed is not being funded, what is your other option? You have to homeschool, or you have to go to a private school that has that particular availability. Or you go to the public school, which is the other issue. You send them to public school, and then we as a public school have to find those services. And if those services are not funded, because they're not, we then have to come out of general funding to help that particular student. And where that really comes into play, honestly, on the budget. So we're a K through 8 district with a charter high school. Say that each student brings in approximately $15,000 in round figures of revenue that we're supposed to use to educate that student. It's called ADA, average daily attendance numbers, based upon the student. But if we have a special needs student, and that special needs student requires $100,000 in special services that we as a public institution must provide. Now what you've basically done is you've taken the funding away from 5, 4.5 general ed students who in theory now don't have any money coming towards their education. And that's the disconnect fiscally from the state down to what we call the local education associations, the LEAs. So I think that's why you're seeing a shift to private schooling and to public homeschooling or chartering schooling than overall general public ed. And that's a big issue right now. That in addition to general concepts about some school districts being overly conservative, which is not a lot, or some being, generally speaking, overly liberal, which in this state is quite a few.
Perfect. I really appreciate that really in-depth answer because you really build the case that it's great to have school choice. It's great to be able to have the option to homeschool and have private school and parochial school and charter schools. But I'm someone that's a product of the public school system. I like to think that I turn out so bad. But when we have good leaders like you who believe in the power of public education, as long as there's good financial stewardship and there's good values in place and people that want to fight for families, there's always opportunities to be able to be successful in the public school system. So I
fully agree. I'm a public school kid myself. I went to these schools myself when I was school age. My kids have gone through these schools, the same schools that I'm now the trustee of. I attended, my kids attended, my brother attended. You can be successful. There's going to be good kids at private schools and bad kids at private schools as far as your social connections. Same thing for public school. A lot of that comes back to the parents. How are you raising your children? Who are they going to associate with? And how involved are you with their education? How involved are you with their extracurricular activities? As a parent, how involved are you with their social connections, which becomes more problematic today because of social media and the access to devices than it ever was in my generation. So I was the last generation that didn't have a device in my hand from the date of birth.
Perfect. So you touched upon different ways to be able to educate. And I know that there, along with different avenues to be successful in school, there's other avenues to be successful in life, depending on your upbringing, depending on different examples. Like I was someone that went to college after I graduated from high school. I know many that have done that, but there's also people that believe in the power of entrepreneurship and being business owners, and then also being able to go to trade school. So what's your stance in regards to be able to promote all these alternative methods of having a career, you know, in while maintaining your role and being the president of Cajon Valley?
Well, I think there's been an inappropriate stigma to an extent that if you're going to go through high school and then you're just going to go to work, that somehow you have not been successful, right? First of all work, I don't care what your job is, all work has value, period, right? There is a sector of employment for everybody, and it all contributes to the overall economy. It all contributes to the overall benefit of society. So let's start there. So at Cajon Valley specifically, we created an organic original curriculum called the World of Work. Now, the World of Work, a little bit of quick background. Ed Hidalgo was an executive at Qualcomm in their HR department. He knew our superintendent. Ed Hidalgo was building a pathways for Qualcomm employees, some who were making $250,000 a year, engineers, but hated their job because it didn't align with their strengths, their interests, their values. They were just raised from little kids to become engineers. So he was working on that project, and then he started working with University of San Diego on developing out what does the world of work look like. Now, he knew our superintendent. We decided to bring Ed over and that idea, and then I had the idea as a lawyer, I will throw that out there, to hire him directly. The reason for that is we now own the intellectual property that then's developed on our time. The idea was to take the RIASEC, which is a framework that designs and breaks down as closely as you can what somebody's strengths, interests, and values are. Because all of the data points show that if you are interested in something you're studying, you're more likely to complete that. If you like and are aligned with the values of a company or of a particular employment, you're vastly more likely to remain in that employment, be happy in that employment, and then be successful in that employment. So how do you turn that into a curriculum? That's exactly what we did. We took that curriculum, we built the curriculum, we trademarked the curriculum. We now sell that curriculum worldwide to other districts. That then brings in a revenue stream. We're the only public school district in the country that has a product that is sold to other districts that brings that revenue back to our general revenue fund. That's still being worked out as far as how much versus the company that helps sell that product for us. There's always iterations. We're always developing it. But most recently, we just received over $1 million grant to continue to develop that work curriculum. And without it, there's no $1 million grant in Cajon Valley, right? We are very unique in that concept of trying to get ahead and show kids that there are pathways that go to their core values that they're interested in, that they can be connected to, get them into internships, get them into externships, get them off campus when they're in middle school and in high school, get them out in the community to see how that works, and then align that with the California A through G requirements for the college acceptance. And we've been able to do that with our charter high school. It's very different thinking, again, falling back again on competency-based education as to what are your competencies? Are you moving forward with your age group or are you not? And then if you're not, then how do we develop that? But also, how does that dovetail into a potential career? So we try to introduce these children to numerous careers. but it's not a standalone curriculum either. Don't make that mistake. So if you're in history, as an example, I use this example all the time, and we're talking about the moon race, and we're talking about how we landed on the moon. Well, it's not just this date, this happened. It is, what type of education did the astronaut have to become an astronaut? What type of risk-taking personality did the astronaut have to become an astronaut? What about the engineer that designed the rocket, or the people at ground control? You can turn that history curriculum into a careers curriculum by demonstrating all of those factors and values, so that the kids in the classroom that say, I don't want to ever be an astronaut, I'm afraid of flying, they can say, oh, I could be an engineer. What does that engineer do? So it adds to traditional curriculum in a way that has not been thought of before. It's very different than what I see. My own daughter's in high school right now. She's at a very good high school, but it's very different. The world of work is in the detail and how it goes towards the child versus where I see the career pathway concept at the high school level, where the child's supposed to go and find the career. See, so if the career finds you and you match up to that career, success is going to happen. So the RIASEC stands for different bases. So realistic, entrepreneurial, social. It should come as no surprise that my letters are E and S for entrepreneurial and social, right? That involves lawyers, people in sports, and politicians. That's me in a nutshell right there.
Beautiful. I really appreciate that descriptive answer, because I remember being in high school and all that pressure of like deciding what you want to do for the next 50 years. I don't know many people that know how to do that, but there's nothing wrong with being able to plant those seeds and be able to put students in those kind of environments as early as middle school and high school. So that way they are more prepared to decide, or at least have a more clear starting point in regards to where they can go. Because not everyone is meant to go to college, and that's perfectly okay. We need business owners. We need people that can, build homes and be carpenters and whatnot. And I appreciate what you said too, like all good work is noble. So my last few questions for you, Mr. Miller, is it's no surprise too, we've noticed following the COVID-19 pandemic that the teachers unions have really been at the forefront in regards to opposing pro-parental school board candidates such as yourself, because of the pushback and those taking stances with being able to put families and parents first. So for your race in particular for reelection, do you anticipate a tough reelection this cycle? And, for our community, we have a very strong base here. How can we all support you and follow your campaign?
So the first part of that question is the union concept. The interesting thing about Cajon Valley, right? We're in the East County of San Diego. I grew up out here. My kids grew up out here. I like to still call it, it's still America in the East County. We still have values. We still, again, Second Amendment is out here. We still go to church out here. We still have family values. We were the largest public school district in the state of California that stayed open during COVID. All right. So I want to break that down just very quickly. World shuts down on March 16th, 2020. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Remember that? Okay. We take spring break early. We take our spring break early. Our kids, because of our superintendent before I got there, were already working on remote one-to-one technology. They had Chromebooks that they took home. Very unusual for a K through 8 school district. And having a third grader take home the Chromebook is not something most school districts have. They have iPads or Chromebooks at school, but not take home. So our kids were already used to working off of a computer. That helped. We then had a meeting with 200 of our administrators, our bargaining units, which are classified, and our certificated staff, their leadership. And there's only one place in San Diego that would hold 200 people at that point in time because everybody's terrified, the Coronado Marriott. And for 3 days, we worked through how are we going to get through and reopen and have a curriculum for these kids. Well, the state mandated that schools stay open for essential care workers, police officers, firefighters, nurses, and I would be remiss if I did not say gun stores, because we won that case for the San Diego County gun owners, so that was deemed a critical source. Well, other school districts didn't do that. We did. So we had 3,000 kids back on campuses, remote learning, but with a tutor, right? Now you have an actual adult educator or paraeducator in the classroom with these kids. That got us through that semester. Now, they shut down summer school. Could not have summer school, remember that? But you could have camp. So Gavin Newsom could send his kids to camp, but you couldn't send your kid to summer school. So using the Second Amendment background that I have, where we're always trying to work around the crazy laws that this state puts together, well, Camp Cajon was born. So we just call it summer school camp, and all of a sudden we can have kids in school. We had over 6,000 kids on campus that summer. One transmission of COVID, one from a special ed student to a special ed assistant. That was it, because we mandated all of these things. We worked with UCSD to put their virus load monitors in our wastewater. We worked with the local biotech, so testing, the kids could spit into a tube instead of having their brain scraped with that big, swab going up their nose. I mean, what second grader doesn't want to spit, right? So we worked out of the box and were able to stay open. By that fall, we had an A and B on-campus schedule already. That was at least a year ahead of most people. And then we went to full-time school by that semester. I tell you that story to answer your question. Do you think we could have done that without janitors, bus drivers, lunch ladies, teachers? No. To have them on board in our district in the East County was vital. So we are unique. We are a unicorn somewhat. We have a Republican board that has a collective bargaining unit in the teachers union and the classified union that pulls in the same direction, because we do try to, at least most of us, try to take the politics out and say, okay, what is really in the best interest of these kids? Well, the best interest is to have them in class. The best interest is in-person learning. So we've worked through that issue. Part of my practice, as you know, but for their listeners, right, is I'm an NFL sports agent. For 27 years, I've been in the National Football League representing labor, right, football players, against management in contract negotiations, arbitrations, and everything else you can think of. That gives me some unique background on collective bargaining or contracts associated with our teachers' unions and our classified unions. Well, they like, frankly, having somebody that knows what they're talking about instead of being told what to think by whomever. So I have no pushback, and I have the support of our particular union leadership, which is, I know, unique. I'm one of the only, in fact, I might be the only Republican in San Diego County that can claim in every race I've run so far to have the endorsement of conservative groups, inclusive of the party, and the teachers, or a teachers union, I should say. It just doesn't happen unless you are really doing the work. And I'm very fortunate that way. Now, parents' rights. I'm a family law attorney, professional sports agent. I fight for parents' rights literally every single day in court against family court services, child welfare services, the deadbeat dads of the world. So there's nobody more uniquely qualified to understand the needs of parents. Plus, again, I still have school-age children. My grandkids still have older kids too. My grandkids are now in the school district for my older daughter. So I have a lot of vested interest to make smart decisions, not politically necessarily based decisions. And the parental notification issues, there was actually a press conference today in Sacramento on this exact issue. We'll see what the legislature, what the written word looks like tomorrow, because that's going to come out tomorrow. because they're trying to change. There's 3 current cases in the state of California on parental notification rights associated with everything from transgenderism and other topics. And now the legislature is trying to take it out of the court's hands and redraft some law. So that is very much in flux right now. But long story short, if you send your kids to school, you should know what's going on in the school, period.
Perfect. Last question before we end the podcast is, how can everyone follow your campaign and support you?
So, MillerForSchoolBoard.com. I have a number of articles, interviews, my current plan. There's a lot there. We have a huge fundraiser coming up because I do a few things, right? School board, sports agent, just finished the NFL draft, lawyer. I respectfully don't have time to do 20 small fundraisers. And I want to have fun when I do a fundraiser. So on June 14th, we're going to go on my friend's private yacht. It's a 100-foot boat. And we are going to cruise San Diego Bay. Now it's not a $20 show up and have some pinwheel sandwiches, right? It's going to be $250 a head. But you will have a great time for a few hours on an amazing boat with some great people and good company. So that's our next fundraiser. Love to have people join that are not necessarily connected to us outside or connected to us inside of my group of friends. So no, please go to the website, make a donation, and in the donation little box, put yacht cruise. And then I'll get back to you and tell you how to get there, because we're not going to publicly display where the slip is for obvious reasons, I think. But vote. If you'd like to contact me and volunteer, we're going to hang up signs. We're going to do walking. We're going to do all of those things that need to be done to win these races. And we're going to go out and we're going to get it done. I'm the incumbent. This will be my last term. It's my intended last term. And you don't want to turn over what is the equivalent of a business that has a $300 million budget, 2,300 employees. We're the largest employer in the East County, to somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. We need to keep experience on the board, long story short.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jim Miller. Really appreciate your time. That concludes our second episode of the SUIR podcast. Next month, we're going to be interviewing Matt Gunderson, who's running for the 49th Congressional District, and El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells, who's running for the California Congressional District 51. So stay tuned for that. But thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to support Jim Miller for Cajon Valley School Board Trustee President. Go to millerforschoolboard.com. Thank you, everyone.